Hello, friends, and welcome back to Market Shares. I am your host, Tony Blodgett, and today I'm going to unpack an article I referenced in my previous episode talking about the lock-in effect. We've all heard about the lock-in effect, and we're going to talk about, is it a reality or is it a myth? And I'm not sure that the data that I'm going to present here today is going to give us that final answer, but we'll see. We'll see what your thoughts on it are. If you missed our last episode, go check it out. We talked about the optimism of a stable market in 2026, which I'm excited about. I got to say, I'm just overall optimistic about this year. For whatever reason, we've been through just a lot of challenging years. It all started in 2022 when interest rates went from 3 to 7%, and we've been waiting for that to turn around ever since. And it's been a slow turn. It's like turning a huge aircraft carrier. You know, they don't just turn on a dime. It's been a slow turn. But you guys, things have been moving in our direction. 24 was better than 23. 25 was better than 24. And I suspect 26, I don't think it's going to be a record setter, but it's going to continue improving for all of us in the mortgage and real estate industry. And I think that's great news. All right. This is an interesting article because we've talked a lot about the lock-in effect. Matter of fact, we give a lot of, credit, let's say, to the lock-in effect as to why there's not a lot of transactions happening. And in this article, Logan Mohtashami, I hope I get his name right, with Housing Wire, who is awesome. I love listening to his podcast, and whenever he posts on social media, which is often, you don't see him do a lot of podcasts outside of Housing Wire anymore. So I'm going to bring some of his content to you in these couple episodes because I just think it's really interesting, especially as we start off a new year, listening to somebody who I think really has their finger on the pulse. He is the head lead economist over at Housing Wire, and I think has a good feel for a lot of these things. He's definitely opinionated, though. So, his take on the lock-in effect is, I don't really think there's a lock-in effect. And let's talk about these numbers, and let's see what you think about this. So, as he says here, I've often debated whether the mortgage rate lockdown effect is real or just another housing myth. But what is interesting is, here's what the data shows, you guys. And I'm going to, throughout this episode, we'll pop up a few of the graphs and charts that Housing Wire provided with this article so you can kind of follow along with me. Just some quick numbers. Okay, so homeowners with mortgage rates at 6% or higher, okay? In 2022, that number was only 6.99% of homeowners had a mortgage of 6% or higher, only less than 7%. Now, that number in the Q3 of 2025 was 21.2% of all mortgages are at a 6% or higher interest rate. Homeowners with a rate lower than 3% in 2022 was 24.58%. Now that's only 20%. So that number's gone from almost 25% down to 20% of people with less than a 3% interest rate. And homeowners with rates between 3 and 4. In 2022, that number was as high as just over 40%. And now it's just over 30%. At the end of 2025. So definitely we've seen a shift, right? I think I mentioned in my last episode that we had more people under 6 than over 6. I don't know that that's really the stat here. The stat is we have, more people over 6 than are under 3, okay? So I want to clarify that point. So I'm just going to throw up this chart here on the page. You can see it. More people have rates over 6% than 3%, and you can see that represented here on the chart. It might be hard for you to read, but under 3% is the bottom in the red, and over 6% is the gray that's up on top. And there's more people, not by a lot, but there's definitely more people, and it's growing. Those numbers are converging on each other as we move forward. Now, you might wonder to yourself, as many of us do, why would someone even give up an interest rate of 2.5%, 3%, 4% for a rate of 5%, 6%, 7%. And the reality is there's a lot of factors that come into play here. We've talked about many of them here on the this podcast. Some of the obvious ones are just home prices, right? Like maybe they're in an area where their home's gone up a lot in value, they have a ton of equity, and they don't mind moving to an area that's more affordable, using some of that equity, paying cash for a home, or substantially lowering, their mortgage amount as they prepare for retirement or something like that. Property taxes is a huge factor. I'm here in Washington State. They just continue to jack up property taxes, so that could be a reason why people might move. Insurance costs. I mean, certain states, it's almost impossible to get insurance, and you would think, man, in years past, insurance was not even a factor. It was just, it's just one of the small pieces of the PITI payment. But now insurance is a major factor when people are buying a home, especially in certain states where they have a lot of natural disasters, whether it be fires, hurricanes, earthquakes, things of that nature. You've seen, whole insurance companies pull out of certain markets and premiums go up just to insane levels. So all those things are very relevant factors that could force someone, or not force them, but urge them to maybe have to sell their house. And the good news is for those home buyers is almost all of them are in a much better financial position with their house than they've ever been, especially way better than it was before the housing crash when, 23% of all homes were underwater at that time. Look at this chart, the Great American Cash Cushion, they call it. Look how few people have negative equity. It's so small, you can't even see it. But at the very, very top, above that gray section, there's a little tiny red section. And those are people with negative equity. It's basically zero. And if you look at people with greater than 65% loan to value, it's the large red section at the bottom. That's incredible how much equity people have in their homes. We talk about this all the time when we're talking about cash out refinances and the like. This just shows you in a graph that people have opportunities to do what they want to do because they have this huge cushion. The other big factor, and I mentioned this briefly in the last episode, it's credit scores. We hear a lot about people that are maxed out on their credit cards and consumer debts at an all-time high. That's true, but if you look at the outstanding mortgages over the last 15 years, the majority of home buyers that were purchasing homes have a 720 credit score or higher. So I'll throw that graph up here, just higher credit scores dominate mortgages now. So you can see the gray area is people over 760. Really, you don't get into the even 660 and below are those two little tiny, lines at the bottom, the dark gray and the red. So, people have more options when it comes to what they do because they have better credit scores. Now, the other thing that is going on here is there's not a lot of foreclosures, right? We've had times in the past where there was massive foreclosures, forcing people to move, find other housing situations, providing a lot of inventory to the market, things of that nature. And what you see is foreclosure data is not even back to 2019 levels. I'm going to throw up that chart. Foreclosures and bankruptcies are still below pre-pandemic levels. And, they're just really, really low, not just based on recent years, but historically speaking, they're quite low. So I think that's a factor as well. And then on the inventory side of the equation, now this is interesting because, last week's episode, I talked about another article that Logan had written, and these seem to be a little bit contradictory, but it says, we aren't back to normal levels with inventory. 1.43 million is the current level of listings per the National Association of Realtors. And usually that number is around 2 to 2.5 million. But if you look at the chart, you can definitely see that inventories are getting back to a more normal level. Not normal yet, but very close to normal. And levels that we've hit back, look at 1995, we're basically at the same level we were at in 95. So maybe not, quite where the average is, but definitely in areas that we've seen, not for a long time, but we've seen them in the past. So inventory levels are definitely coming back. And so look, here's the conclusion that Logan sums up. The data just doesn't support that there is a mortgage lock-in effect going on. We have enough people that have shown through their transactions that they're willing to move despite the low interest rate that they may have, and that's evidenced by the shift in the number of outstanding mortgages. Now, you could also argue that this data is a little incomplete because it doesn't really tie out directly, was there just more people coming into the market and that diluted the number of people that were left with those lower mortgages? Like, it doesn't really give us specifics on who of those homeowners gave up their 3% rate and went to a 6.5%, 7% interest rate, right? So we don't know that. We're just looking at the overall statistics. So you might be able to pick that data apart a little bit. This is where you get to come to your own conclusion if you think this is a driving factor. But the last sentence of the article, I think, is something that we all need to consider, which is that housing tenure, meaning the amount of time that people have been staying in their homes, has doubled or even tripled since 2008. So my point being is this is not a post-COVID phenomenon. People have been staying in their homes longer and longer and longer for a very long time. And I think that the point here that he's making, and I kind of agree with him on this one, is that people just don't move as often. I remember when I first got in the mortgage industry, it was assumed that people would move every 7 years. They would remortgage every 3 to 4 years. That was kind of the normal speak that people assumed in our industry. And the reality is people stay in their homes longer. Now, does a low interest rate come into play? Yeah, it's definitely not the only factor, I think, to Logan's point. And I think you're going to see more and more people starting to transact in 2026 despite their low interest rate, partly because the market is normalized. No one thinks interest rates are going to go back to where they were. People can kind of be confident that the range that they're in right now, although it could go to like I said, the 5.75 over the next few months. These are not huge swings that are anticipated in mortgage interest rates. And once people have stability, as we've mentioned before, their incomes continue to increase. Their equity has been increasing over the years. People have the power if they want to transact, if they need to move, to buy that bigger home, to downsize because, they just don't need as big of a home as they have now. Maybe they're empty nesters. They want to move to a different part of the country because it's more affordable. They want to pay cash for a home. Maybe they're being taxed out of their state, which I'm not even going to get into that, but that's a thing. People are moving because of crazy tax policies in certain states, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But people have the freedom to do that. That's what this is saying, is that they have high FICO scores. They have lots of equity. They can transact if they want to. And so, I think this is an important thing for us to wrap our head around, because keep in mind, as mortgage and real estate professionals, we set the tone for our clients, right? They're looking for us to be the experts at what's going on. And I think relying too heavily on the narrative that the lock-in effect just has everybody not wanting to transact is a misrepresentation of what's going on. I think that it's a factor for some people, but it's definitely not the driving factor if people are going to look for a new home or purchase their first home or any of those things. It's just not a big enough deal. And that's why I wanted to cover this today, because I don't want us planting that seed either in our own minds or into the home buying population, or even with sellers, that this is such a big thing that they should be concerned about. People should look at all the factors involved in home ownership, and they should make the right decision for them. And if they have the power to purchase the home that they really want, that meets their family's needs, they should consider doing that, because the interest rate is just one factor. And the good news is they keep getting better, and that gap is going to continue to decrease, is my guess, as we continue to move through 2026. So let me know your thoughts below. I'm very curious how people feel about this. If nothing else, I think these are great talking points and things for you to understand as you start off the new year. Here is just a level set, like a baseline understanding of what's really going on with our existing homeowners and with interest rates and everything that's around that. So I hope you found this article breakdown helpful. And I hope you enjoy the Market Shares podcast. I'm trying to bring information to you that you might not stumble upon yourself while you're out and about, and things that I think are interesting for us to discuss. So if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel. We do drop out a new episode every single Friday. It comes out at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And let people know, let other people in the industry know about the Market Shares podcast, where we talk about mortgage, real estate, and once in a while, we pepper in a few other things that are just interesting. And we're excited about the year here in 2026. And I hope that you are too. And I hope you'll stick around for our future episodes. Until then, take care.